Anyway, so we talked about last week the fact that the Washington Post decided not to endorse a candidate, and that the decision was basically, forced on the people who work at the Washington Post by the owner, Jeff Bezos, of course the founder owner of Amazon, or a major shareholder of Amazon, not owner, and a number of people from the editorial board of the Washington Post have resigned. A number of people have claimed that they have canceled the Washington Post subscriptions to punish Jeff Bezos. And the idea is Jeff Bezos siding with Trump in one way or another, and that he is overriding the editorial board's decision to endorse Kamala Harris by not endorsing anybody. So Jeff Bezos, I think it was this morning, published an editorial. Maybe it was yesterday, actually. It was yesterday. Yesterday night. Okay, yesterday night. So it was published in print this morning. Published an editorial in the Washington Post explaining what he did. And I think it's worth considering what he actually says. So I'm going to read you maybe the whole thing, maybe parts of it. We'll see how it goes. But I think it's important to understand where he's coming from. And then, we should think about, is this the right way to do it? He writes, in the annual, this is Bezos, in the annual public surveys about trust and reputation, journalists and the media have regularly fallen near the very bottom, often just above Congress. But in this year's Gallup poll, we have managed to fall below Congress. Our profession is now the least trusted of all. Something we are doing is clearly not working. Let me give an analogy. Voting machines must meet two requirements. They must count the vote accurately, and people must believe they count the vote accurately. The second requirement is distinct from and just as important as the first, right? So you need people to believe you. It's not enough to do a good job. Likewise, this newspaper. We must be accurate, and we must be believed to be accurate. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but we are failing in the second requirement. Most people believe the media is biased. Anyone who doesn't see this is paying scant attention to reality, and those who fight reality lose. Good for him. Reality is an undefeated champion. It would be easy to blame others for our long run and continuing fall in credibility. But a victim mentality will not help. Complaining is not a strategy. We must work harder to control what we can control, to increase our credibility. Okay, so he's identifying the media. Nobody trusts the media. And he's identifying two things that we have to be accurate and we have to be believed to be accurate, and nobody believes we're accurate. He's not challenging, are we accurate? Maybe there is a bias. He's just dealing with the perception. Now, I hope that as he goes through with maybe a restructuring of the Washington Post, he realizes that part of the problem is that the public is right, and that there is a problem with accuracy, and that the product is not as good as it should be, and that one of the things I have to resurrect is accuracy, and that hopefully it's not too late. Once you've established that what you're doing is good, that what you're doing is accurate, what you're doing is valid, then you can start convincing other people that it is. But first you have to do the first. And I'm not sure, I don't know that that's what he's suggesting here. He continues, presidential endorsements do nothing to tip the scales of an election. No undecided voters in Pennsylvania are going to say, I'm going with newspaper A's endorsement. None. What presidential endorsements actually do is create a perception of bias, a perception of non-independence. I think he's right. Ending them is a principled decision, and it's the right one. Eugene Mayer, publisher of the Washington Post from 33 to 46, thought the same, and he was right. By itself, declining to endorse presidential candidates is not enough to move us very far up the trust scale. But it's a meaningful step in the right direction. I wish we had made the change earlier than we did, in a moment further from the election and the emotions around it. That was inadequate planning and not some intentional strategy. I would also like to be clear that no quid pro quo of any kind is at work here. Neither campaign nor candidate was consulted or informed of any level or in any way about the decision. Now he goes through a concrete here, which I will skip. When it comes to the appearances of conflict, I'm not an ideal owner of the Post. Every day, some way, some Amazon executive or Blue Origin executive or someone from the other philanthropies and companies I own or invest in is meeting with government officials. I once wrote that the Post is a complexifier for me. It is. But it turns out I'm also a complexifier for the Post. You can see my wealth and business interest as a bulwark against intimidation, or you can see them as a web of conflicting interests. Only my own principles can tip the balance from one to the other. Good for him. I assure you that my views here are in fact principled. I believe my track record as the Post since 2013 backs this up as the owner of the Post. You are, of course, free to make your own determination, but I challenge you to find one instance in those 11 years where I have prevailed upon anyone at the Post in favor of my own interests. It hasn't happened. Lack of credibility isn't unique to the Post. Our brethren newspapers have the same issue. And it's a problem not only for the media, but also for the nation. Many people are turning to off-the-cuff podcasts, inaccurate social media posts, and other unverified news sources, which can quickly spread misinformation and deepen divisions. I agree. The Washington Post and the New York Times win prizes, but increasingly we talk only to a certain elite. More and more we talk to ourselves. He says, in parentheses, it wasn't always this way. In the 90s, we achieved 80% household penetration in D.C. metro area. And this is the final paragraph. While I do not and will not push my personal interest, I will also not allow this paper to stay on autopilot and fade into irrelevancy, overtaken by unresearched podcasts and social media barbs, not without a fight. It's too important. The stakes are too high. Now more than ever, the world needs a credible, trusted, independent voice, and we're better than the voice to originate than the capital city of the most important country in the world. To win this fight, we have to exercise new muscles. Some changes will be a return to the past, and some will be new inventions. Criticisms will be part of the parcel of anything new, of course. This is the way of the world. None of this will be easy, but it will be worth it. I am so grateful to be part of this endeavor. Many of the finest journalists you'll find anywhere are at work at the Washington Post, and they work painstakingly every day to get the truth they deserve to be believed. So that is Jeff Bezos, and good for him for taking what appears to be a principled stance here. A lot of work needs to be done, and he says in the op-ed that he's going to do it to bring, I think, the business of the Washington Post back. I do think the world needs it. I do think it's incredibly important. Maybe he's taking something out of Elon Musk's playbook in the sense that these gazillionaires need to get involved. They need to be the guys who save the culture. I'm not sure Elon Musk is doing very well in that regard. He might be helping us push us over the cliff. But, Bezos maybe can help here. I'd love to see him get more involved in the Post. I'd love to see him start thinking about ways in which the Post can be less biased, more accurate. resurrect kind of a real, the old tradition of the Washington Post as speaking out against the man, the powers to be, the elites, and challenging conventional wisdoms. I don't know if the Post was ever that. I think maybe on certain issues it was. Hopefully it can be even more than it was in the past. But it would be great to have, a national newspaper do what it's supposed to do, not just do the reporting from the scene, which nobody else does, but also clean up its act in terms of the bias, the woke, the political correct nonsense that has infected so much of what's called the mainstream media. Because there is no alternative. It's not like there are alternatives out there. At the end of the day, there is no independent sources of news. There's independent sources of interpretation. And most of those, how can I say it, of low quality most of the time. With the exception, of course, of the Iran Book Show, where you get news update almost every day, pretty much. And it's good, and it's correct, and it's unbiased.